The walk-in freezer hissed as the heavy metal door creaked open. Sylvester Stallone's breath caught. Huddled in the corner, trembling, silent, was a little girl. Locked inside, hidden, forgotten. No one knew she was there. He stepped into the icy dark, and what he uncovered next would haunt the town forever. Welcome to Stallone Unleashed. Let's uncover what really happened. The restaurant was nearly empty, bathed in the soft glow of dimmed lights that reflected off polished wooden tables and gleaming silverware. Sylvester Stallone's namesake eatery had always been a bustling spot, but tonight, the hum of activity had quieted to a gentle murmur. A handful of late diners lingered over their meals, voices low and relaxed. The clink of glasses and the occasional scrape of a chair were the only sounds filling the air. Behind the scenes, the kitchen staff moved with practiced efficiency, plating the last orders before closing time. The scent of garlic, herbs, and sizzling meat hung in the air, comforting and familiar. Stallone himself was nowhere to be seen by the guests. He preferred to visit unannounced, often slipping in through the back entrance to watch his restaurant operate without the distraction of fame. Tonight, he wanted nothing more than a quiet meal after a long day, hoping for the simple pleasure of good food and the normalcy that came with it. The staff, used to the occasional surprise appearance, continued their work with a professional ease, unaware that their owner had quietly entered the building. Sylvester's footsteps were soft but deliberate as he made his way past the tables, nodding briefly to a few familiar faces before heading toward the kitchen to check in. The restaurant, with its warm atmosphere and cozy corners, seemed peaceful, just the way he liked it. But beneath the surface of this calm night, something was stirring, a faint sound almost drowned out by the kitchen's bustle. It was a sound no one expected in a place like this, a fragile cry barely audible over the hum of refrigeration units and the soft chatter. Sylvester paused mid-step, the subtle noise catching his attention. At first, he thought it might be a stray cat outside or a misplaced kitchen utensil knocking against metal. But then the cry came again, unmistakably human and unmistakably desperate. A quiet unease settled over him as he turned toward the source, his instincts sharpening. The night's calm was about to be shattered, and Sylvester Stallone knew he was about to face something far more serious than a routine dinner. Sylvester moved quietly through the dimly lit hallway that led from the dining area to the kitchen. His eyes narrowed, ears straining to catch the faint cry that lingered just beyond the normal sounds of the restaurant closing down. He wasn't one to jump at shadows, but something about that sound unsettled him deeply. It was a sound no one should ever hear in a place meant for joy and gathering. He glanced around the kitchen. Empty countertops, pots and pans neatly stacked, the staff winding down their shift. No one else seemed to notice the noise. Stallone's surprise visit had begun like any other, a casual drop-in to check on his restaurant and enjoy a late meal. But now it felt like fate had brought him here for a reason he couldn't ignore. His footsteps slowed as he approached the back storage area, a less traveled part of the restaurant where supplies were kept cold and locked away. The air grew cooler, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the dining room. That's when he heard again, soft, broken sobs, muffled yet unmistakably close. His heart tightened as he scanned the room for any sign of what, or who, might be causing the sound. Sylvester's mind raced. Could it be a stray animal trapped somewhere? A prank by one of the younger staff? None of it made sense. This was different. Urgent. Real. He moved toward the large walk-in freezer, its heavy metal door cold to the touch. Without hesitation, he grasped the handle and pushed. The door groaned open, revealing a shadowy interior and a blast of icy air. There, huddled in the corner on the frosty floor, was a little girl, no more than 6 or 7, her clothes thin and soaked with cold sweat. Tears streaked her face, her small body trembling uncontrollably. She looked up with wide, frightened eyes that seemed to plead for help. Sylvester's surprise visit had just taken a sharp turn from a quiet night to something urgent and terrifying. The familiar world of celebrity and fame faded in that moment, replaced by the raw instinct to protect and save. He knelt beside her, voice gentle but firm, promising safety. This was no longer just a restaurant. It was a rescue mission. The little girl's sobs echoed faintly inside the cold, metallic chamber of the freezer, blending with the hum of refrigeration units. Sylvester felt the chill bite through his jacket, but his focus was on the fragile figure before him. Her small frame shook uncontrollably as she curled tighter into herself, eyes wide and darting around as if expecting danger to return at any moment. The room, lined with frozen crates and shelves stacked with supplies, seemed suddenly hostile. A prison instead of a place meant for storage. Sylvester scanned the space carefully. There was no sign of how she had ended up here, no footprints or disturbed boxes that could explain the girl's presence. The freezer was locked from the outside. No one was supposed to enter without a key or permission. That meant someone had brought her here deliberately, hidden her away in this frigid chamber. The thought sent a cold shiver through Stallone's spine, far deeper than the freezer's temperature. Who could do something so cruel? And why? He wiped the frost from a nearby shelf and used it to wrap gently around the girl's shoulders. "You're safe now," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm of questions swirling in his mind. She trembled but didn't resist. Back in the main kitchen, the staff was unaware of the drama unfolding in the back storage. They chatted softly among themselves, finishing their tasks and preparing to leave. No one had heard the muffled cries that slipped through the walls. No one had noticed the frozen prison hidden behind the unassuming door. Sylvester's mind raced, piecing together what little he could from this silent scene. The girl was terrified, but there was no immediate injury. That was a small relief. Yet the deeper truth remained unseen. A disturbance not just in the physical space, but in the hearts of those responsible. He carefully lifted the girl into his arms, feeling the weight of her fear and exhaustion. Outside the freezer, the warmth of the restaurant awaited, but the cold reality of her situation was only just beginning to thaw. Sylvester knew one thing for certain. This night would change everything. The unseen disturbance had been uncovered, and there was no turning back now. The cry had been soft at first, barely audible over the usual kitchen noises and distant chatter from the dining room. It was a fragile, broken sound that seemed out of place in the bustling restaurant environment. Sylvester had caught it almost by accident, his sharp senses tuned to anything unusual during his quiet visit. But now, as he held the trembling girl close, the mystery of that cry grew heavier in his mind. He scanned her face, looking for any hint of who she was or what had happened. Her eyes were wide with fear, but also a flicker of hope as she sensed he was no threat. Her small lips parted slightly, and then, unexpectedly, she whispered a single word, "Help." Sylvester's heart clenched. That one word, so simple yet so powerful, confirmed everything he feared. This was no accident, no stray lost child. She had been trapped, hidden away, and forgotten, or worse, left to suffer. Questions flooded his mind. Where had she come from? Who had put her there? Why had no one heard her cries before now? The restaurant, so familiar and safe to many, had somehow become a cage. A chilling thought that made Sylvester's jaw tighten. He carefully lifted her out of the freezer, the cold slipping away as they stepped into the warmer kitchen air. The girl's sobs grew quieter, but the weight of her situation pressed heavily on them both. Sylvester's usual world of fame and film roles felt distant, replaced by the urgent reality of a child in need. His mind shifted to action, calling the authorities, getting her medical help, and finding out the truth behind this cruel mystery. But first, he needed to comfort her, to show her that she was no longer alone. As he carried her through the dimly lit kitchen, the muffled cry that had started it all seemed to echo in his mind. That mysterious cry had broken the silence and set in motion a chain of events no one at Stallone's restaurant could have imagined. Tonight, a hidden story would finally be told. Sylvester's footsteps were slow but purposeful as he retraced his path through the quiet restaurant, guided by the fading echoes of that haunting cry. Each step pulled him deeper into a part of the building few ever saw, a maze of storage rooms, supply closets, and cold walk-ins that supported the busy kitchen above. The warmth of the dining area faded behind him, replaced by the sterile chill of the back corridors. The sound had been faint, almost swallowed by the hum of refrigerators and the clatter of dishes, but it had tugged at something primal inside him, a call for help that refused to be ignored. Stallone's eyes scanned every shadowed corner, every door that might hide a secret, every creak in the floorboards. The restaurant's usual hum of activity was replaced by a tense stillness, broken only by his steady breathing and the distant drip of a leaking faucet. He paused outside a heavy metal door, its surface cold and smooth under his fingertips. The muffled sobs came again, sharper this time, a fragile voice trapped behind the solid barrier. Without hesitation, Sylvester gripped the handle and pulled, the door groaning open to reveal the walk-in freezer, an intimidating chamber of ice and silence. Inside, the cold air hit him like a blast, but the source of the sound was immediately clear. There, huddled in the corner, was the little girl, her small body curled tightly, cheeks stained with tears. Her frightened eyes lifted to meet his, searching for something, anything that might offer safety. Sylvester knelt beside her, voice low and soothing. "I heard you," he said softly. "You're safe now." She hesitated, then nodded faintly, trembling but not resisting as he wrapped a jacket around her shivering shoulders. Following the sound had led him to a chilling truth hidden within the familiar walls of his own restaurant, a truth that demanded answers and action. As he stepped back into the warmth, the weight of responsibility settled firmly on his shoulders. This was more than a rescue. It was a mission. The freezer's harsh fluorescent light flickered faintly as Sylvester's eyes adjusted to the cold, sterile space. What struck him most wasn't just the freezing temperature or the rows of stacked supplies. It was the unmistakable presence of something deeply wrong. The little girl, curled up against the icy floor, shivered uncontrollably despite the thin jacket he'd wrapped around her. Her small frame was fragile, pale from exposure, and her wide eyes held a mixture of terror and disbelief. As Sylvester took in the scene, the chilling reality sank in. This wasn't a place where a child belonged. Someone had hidden her here deliberately, locking her away in the cold, far from warmth and safety. The heavy door, designed to keep food fresh, had become a prison door, silent, cold, and cruel. He scanned the freezer's corners and shelves, searching for any clue, a scrap of clothing, a forgotten toy, anything that might explain how she ended up here. Nearby, a small, torn piece of fabric caught his eye, stuck to a jagged edge of a metal shelf. He gently picked it up, noting its faded color and frayed threads. It wasn't much, but it was something, a sign of the life the girl had been torn from. Sylvester's heart tightened. He imagined the hours she must have spent trapped in that freezing chamber, the terror of isolation, the hopelessness of waiting for someone to hear her cries. The thought was unbearable. Suddenly, his mind shifted from shock to determination. This chilling discovery wasn't just about finding a lost child. It was about exposing a hidden cruelty, unraveling a mystery, and making sure no one else would suffer like this. The restaurant, once a place of laughter and warmth, had become a backdrop for a dark secret. He carefully lifted the girl into his arms, her tiny body fragile against his chest. The cold air was replaced by the warmer hum of the kitchen as they stepped out, but the weight of the freezer's chill lingered in his mind. This discovery had changed everything, and Stallone knew the fight to protect this child was only just beginning. The little girl clung tightly to Sylvester's jacket, her trembling fingers digging into the fabric as if it were the only lifeline left in a world that had suddenly turned cold and cruel. Her wide eyes darted nervously around the kitchen, still haunted by the icy chamber she'd been locked inside. The terror in her gaze was raw and unfiltered, a silent plea for safety that broke through the toughest exterior. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, punctuated by quiet sobs that threatened to spill over at any moment. She wasn't just cold. She was scared in a way that went beyond physical discomfort. The kind of fear that comes from being trapped, forgotten, and helpless. Sylvester could feel the weight of that fear pressing down on him, a responsibility he hadn't anticipated but was determined to carry. As he gently stroked her hair, trying to offer comfort, the girl's small voice barely rose above a whisper. "I'm scared," she admitted, her words trembling but honest. It was a simple truth, but in that moment, it said everything. The horror of her situation, the trauma she had endured, and the uncertain path ahead. Sylvester knelt down to meet her eyes, his own steady and reassuring. "You're safe now. I'm here," he said firmly. The promise wasn't just words. It was a vow to protect, to fight for her, and to make sure she never felt that fear again. Around them, the restaurant staff had begun to notice something was wrong. Whispers floated through the air as a few cautious glances were exchanged, sensing the gravity of the moment. But for Sylvester and the girl, the world had shrunk to this small space, this fragile connection between two strangers brought together by fate. Though her body still trembled, the faintest flicker of trust began to grow in her eyes. It was fragile and hesitant, but it was there, a fragile seed of hope planted in the cold aftermath of terror. Sylvester knew it would take time, patience, and care, but he was ready to face whatever came next. The girl was trapped no longer, but the journey to healing was just beginning. Sylvester's hands worked quickly but carefully, fumbling for the heavy chains and locks that sealed the freezer door shut from the outside. The cold metal felt unforgiving beneath his fingers, each click and clank echoing loudly in the stillness. This was no ordinary rescue. It was a fight against time and cold, against the cruel confinement that had held the girl captive. He knew every second mattered. The girl's small frame shivered against him as he struggled to free her from the frozen prison. Her breath came out in quick, visible puffs, the frigid air biting into her lungs. Stallone's voice remained calm and steady, offering reassurance even as his mind raced to find a way out of this chilling trap. "Hold on, we're getting you out," he promised, his tone firm but gentle. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last lock fell away. The heavy door creaked open wider, allowing the warmer air of the kitchen to rush in and push back the biting cold. The little girl blinked against the sudden light, confusion mingling with relief in her eyes. The walls that had closed in around her moments before were now retreating, and with them, the suffocating fear that had gripped her. Sylvester carefully lifted her up, cradling her against his chest as the trembling began to ease. The warmth of his jacket was a stark contrast to the icy chamber she'd been trapped in, and slowly, she began to relax, just a little. Every shiver was a reminder of the ordeal she'd endured, but also a sign of hope, a signal that the nightmare was ending. As they stepped fully into the kitchen's warmth, Stallone felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. The frozen prison was broken, but the fight to protect this child had only just begun. Outside the kitchen, the hum of the restaurant continued, unaware of the quiet battle that had taken place within its walls, a battle that had saved a life. The little girl sat wrapped in a warm blanket behind the counter, the flickering kitchen lights casting soft shadows across her pale face. Sylvester sat nearby, watching her carefully, waiting for the right moment to ask questions without overwhelming her. Her eyes, still wide with fear, flickered with curiosity as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. The safety of the restaurant contrasted starkly with the cold prison she'd just escaped. Slowly, with hesitant breaths and trembling words, she began to tell her story. Her voice was fragile, barely above a whisper, but each word painted a haunting picture of neglect and fear. She spoke of being taken from a place she loved, of strangers who kept her hidden away in darkness and cold. She described the loneliness of the freezer, the biting cold that seeped into her bones, and the endless waiting for someone to find her. Sylvester listened intently, every detail tightening the knot of anger and sorrow in his chest. The pieces of her story were patchy, but the message was clear. This child had suffered in silence, trapped in a nightmare far worse than anyone imagined. There were questions she couldn't answer, memories too painful to recall, but her courage in speaking at all was undeniable. Staff members began to gather quietly nearby, their eyes filled with concern and empathy. The warmth in the room grew, not just from the kitchen's heat, but from the collective determination to protect this fragile soul. Sylvester's presence was steady, a pillar of strength amid the swirling uncertainty. As she spoke, a clearer picture emerged, a tale of betrayal, desperation, and hope. The girl's story was more than a personal tragedy. It was a call to action, a demand for justice that echoed through the walls of the restaurant and beyond. Sylvester knew this was only the beginning. Uncovering her story was the first step toward healing, toward shining light on the darkness that had hidden her away. And he vowed to stand by her every step of the way. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and bustling energy, now fell shadowed by an unsettling truth. Sylvester moved cautiously among the stainless steel counters and gleaming appliances, his eyes sharp and searching. What had seemed like a safe haven now held hidden dangers, secrets buried beneath the surface that no one had suspected. The discovery of the girl in the freezer was only the beginning. Sylvester's mind raced with questions. Who had access to these locked rooms? Who could have hidden a child away in a place meant for food storage? The kitchen staff, though shaken by the news, began to whisper among themselves, casting uneasy glances at each other, as if unsure who might be responsible or if anyone could be trusted. Stallone's gaze landed on the back corridors, the narrow passageways where deliveries arrived and supplies were stacked. These were the spaces where shadows lingered, and where someone with ill intent might move unnoticed. The very heart of his restaurant now seemed vulnerable, a stark contrast to the vibrant dining room filled with laughter and light. He began to question everything he'd taken for granted, the locks on the doors, the schedules of staff, even the security measures that had been in place. How had such a dangerous secret gone unnoticed? The thought gnawed at him relentlessly. Sylvester's resolve hardened. This hidden danger wasn't just about one frightened child. It was a symptom of a deeper problem that needed to be rooted out. Every corner of the kitchen, every person who worked there, would come under scrutiny. No detail was too small, no suspicion too trivial. The restaurant, once a symbol of pride and success, had become the backdrop for a hidden darkness. But Sylvester was determined to expose it, to protect the innocent, and to restore the safety and trust that had been shattered. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning, right here in the heart of the kitchen. Sylvester's fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the phone behind the counter, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like never before. This was no longer a matter of private concern. It was an emergency that required help beyond his reach. The warmth of the restaurant faded into the background as he dialed the number, his voice steady but firm when the call connected. 911. What's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, professional. There's a child, Sylvester began, glancing back at the little girl wrapped in a blanket nearby. She was trapped in the freezer of my restaurant. We need immediate assistance, medical and police. As he spoke, his eyes never left the child's face, watching for any sign of distress or fear. The operator assured him help was on the way, asking questions to gather details about the girl's condition and the situation. Sylvester answered as clearly as he could, the urgency growing with every passing second. Around him, the staff began to quietly organize, some fetching blankets and water, others clearing space to make room for the responders. The atmosphere was tense but focused, the shared responsibility settling over everyone present. The little girl sat still, her small hands clutching the edge of the blanket, her eyes flickering between the faces around her. Sylvester knelt beside her again, offering soothing words and steady reassurance. You're not alone anymore. Help is coming. Minutes stretched like hours before the distant wail of sirens pierced the night, growing louder as emergency vehicles pulled up outside the restaurant. The door burst open, and a team of paramedics and officers flowed inside with practiced efficiency. Sylvester stepped aside, explaining the situation quickly but thoroughly. Medical personnel gently examined the girl, checking her vitals and wrapping her in warm layers. Police officers began asking questions, their presence both reassuring and intimidating. Sylvester watched as the professionals took control, knowing that the real work was just beginning. By calling for help, he had set into motion a chain of events that would uncover truths, bring justice, and most importantly, offer the little girl a chance at a new life free from fear. The sound of sirens grew louder outside, slicing through the quiet night like a beacon of hope. Within moments, uniformed police officers flooded into the restaurant, their faces serious and focused as they took control of the scene. Sylvester stood to the side, watching intently as the officers quickly assessed the situation, their calm professionalism contrasting sharply with the tension still hanging in the air. One officer approached Sylvester, notebook in hand, ready to take a statement. Stallone recounted everything he had discovered, the faint cries that led him to the freezer, the frightened little girl, and the chilling reality of what had happened within his own restaurant. The officer listened carefully, occasionally nodding and jotting down details, understanding the gravity of the case. Nearby, detectives began interviewing the kitchen staff and other employees, their questions sharp but respectful. Whispers filled the room as rumors and suspicions started to surface, but the officers remained focused on gathering facts, searching for any clues or inconsistencies that could shed light on who was responsible. Medical personnel continued tending to the girl, their gentle care offering her a small measure of comfort amid the chaos. Her eyes, though still wary, seemed to relax slightly under the watchful protection of those around her. Sylvester's gaze wandered to the freezer door, now sealed off with police tape, a stark reminder of the dark secret hidden within those cold walls. The restaurant, once a place of laughter and community, was now the center of an unfolding investigation that threatened to expose hidden dangers lurking beneath its surface. The police presence brought a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Stallone knew that while the immediate danger had passed, the path ahead would be difficult. There were questions to be answered, truths to be uncovered, and justice to be served. As officers moved through the restaurant with determined purpose, Sylvester stood silently, his mind set on one thing: protecting the little girl and ensuring that no one else would ever suffer as she had. The police had arrived, but the real fight for safety and justice was only beginning. Sylvester watched as the little girl was gently guided away by a kind-faced detective, her tiny hand wrapped securely in the officer's larger one. The room hummed with quiet urgency, officers and medical staff moving efficiently, questions being asked, evidence carefully documented. But amid the flurry of activity, Stallone's focus remained unwavering. Protect this innocent child at all costs. He felt a surge of determination welling inside him. This was no longer just about a shocking discovery in his restaurant. It was about safeguarding a life that had been shattered by cruelty. The innocence of a frightened child demanded more than sympathy. It called for action, for unwavering resolve to shield her from further harm. Sylvester approached the lead detective, his voice steady but resolute. "She needs to be safe. I want to help in any way I can." The detective met his gaze, recognizing the sincerity and strength behind the words. Together, they began discussing the next steps, ensuring the girl's immediate safety, arranging for a secure place where she could heal, and launching a thorough investigation to find who was responsible. The restaurant staff, once hesitant and unsure, now rallied behind Sylvester's leadership. They offered statements, shared what little they knew, and pledged their cooperation. A shared sense of purpose took hold, transforming the space from one of shock into a front line of protection. Outside, news crews began to gather, sensing the gravity of the unfolding story. But Stallone made it clear: the child's privacy and well-being came first. No details would be shared without careful consideration, no pictures taken without consent. Protecting the innocent meant shielding her not just from immediate danger, but from the glare of unwanted attention. As the night deepened, Sylvester remained by the girl's side, a silent guardian watching over her fragile recovery. He knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain, but he was ready to walk it, for her, for justice, and for the promise that no child should ever be left trapped in the dark. The following morning brought a mix of quiet calm and restless urgency. In a small, private room near the back of the restaurant, Sylvester sat across from a gentle detective, ready to answer questions that would help piece together the puzzle of the little girl's ordeal. His mind replayed every moment, from the first cry to the rescue, while his heart weighed heavy with the responsibility of finding answers. The detective's tone was patient, designed to ease the tension rather than escalate it. "Can you tell me who had access to the freezer? Any unusual activity you noticed recently?" Sylvester thought carefully. The staff came and went on rotating shifts, but security had always seemed tight. Yet, someone had managed to use the space as a prison without detection. He shared what he knew about the kitchen routines, delivery schedules, and the staff members' usual comings and goings, hoping it might shed light on the hidden danger. Questions about the girl herself followed. The detective asked if Stallone had noticed anything about her appearance, any clues that might reveal where she'd come from or how long she'd been trapped. Sylvester described the pale skin, the shivering, and the tear-streaked face that had haunted his mind since the rescue. He admitted how little she had been able to say, her story fragmented by fear and trauma. As the questioning continued, Sylvester found himself reflecting on the unseen cracks in the safety of the restaurant. What had been missed? What had gone wrong? He answered honestly, knowing that these details could make all the difference in preventing future tragedies. Outside the room, the restaurant buzzed with quiet activity. Staff whispered among themselves, worried but hopeful that answers were on the way. Sylvester felt the weight of the investigation settle on him, but also a growing determination. Each question answered was a step closer to justice, and every piece of information a chance to protect the innocent. Though the road ahead was uncertain, the search for truth had begun, and Sylvester was ready to see it through. The investigation was moving faster than Sylvester had anticipated. Late into the afternoon, he received a call from the lead detective, a voice edged with urgency and something more, the breakthrough they had been waiting for. A secret long buried beneath the restaurant's polished surface was finally coming to light. The detective met Sylvester in a quiet corner of the building, holding a folder thick with reports and witness statements. "We found something," she began, her eyes serious. "It looks like the girl was brought here by someone within the staff, someone who knew the routines, the blind spots." Sylvester's heart sank. The betrayal wasn't just a random act. It was deliberate, calculated, and hidden in plain sight. The restaurant, his pride and joy, had been compromised from the inside. As the detective shared more details, a picture began to form. A disgruntled employee with a troubled past had used the freezer as a place to hide the girl, possibly as a twisted way to exert control or hide from something larger. There were reports of odd behavior, unexplained absences, and whispered warnings that had gone unheeded. The shock rippled through Sylvester's mind. How had he missed the signs? How had a secret like this stayed buried so long? But amidst the pain of betrayal, a steely resolve took hold. The girl's rescue was just the start. Now came the reckoning. Sylvester promised to cooperate fully with the authorities, offering every resource he could muster to ensure justice was served. The restaurant staff were called in for further questioning, the atmosphere shifting from disbelief to determination to root out the truth. Outside, the story was beginning to leak, drawing the attention of the community and the media. But Sylvester kept his focus steady, shielding the girl and her story from the spotlight, guarding her privacy fiercely. The secret had been revealed, dark and unsettling as it was. But with truth now out in the open, there was hope, a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to make sure that no child would ever again be trapped in the shadows. The truth behind the cry was more painful than anyone had imagined. As investigators pieced together the girl's story, a picture emerged of neglect and desperation, a story of a child stolen from safety and hidden away in a cold, unforgiving place. The cries that had echoed faintly through the restaurant walls were not just calls for help. They were the desperate pleas of a trapped soul longing for freedom. Sylvester sat quietly as detectives explained the details they had uncovered. The girl had been kept isolated, left to survive in the chilling darkness of the freezer, her only companions the cold and the silence. Her captor, an employee with a troubled history, had exploited the trust placed in him, using the hidden spaces within the restaurant as a prison. The community, once shocked by the discovery, now rallied around the little girl's courage and resilience. Local organizations stepped forward to offer support, medical care, and counseling. Stallone felt a deep responsibility, not just as a restaurant owner, but as a protector of innocence. The girl's cry had awakened more than just him. It had stirred an entire community to action. The investigation continued, uncovering the layers of deception and secrecy that had allowed such a tragedy to unfold unnoticed. Each revelation was a reminder of the fragility of safety and the importance of vigilance. But amid the darkness, the girl's spirit shone, a beacon of hope and strength. Sylvester visited her often, offering comfort without pressure, understanding that healing would take time. He saw in her eyes the flicker of trust growing stronger each day, the gradual shift from fear to a cautious hope. The truth behind the cry was a harsh one, but it also brought clarity and purpose. It was a call to protect, to prevent, and to never ignore the silent pleas of those who cannot speak for themselves. Sylvester knew that while the past could not be changed, the future was still theirs to write, a future where no child would be left unheard in the cold. The moment to face the culprit came swiftly, carrying with it a weight that settled heavily on everyone involved. Sylvester stood quietly at the edge of the room where the accused was brought in, a former employee whose once familiar face was now shadowed by guilt and fear. The air was thick with tension, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and the raw ache of betrayal. The man's eyes flickered nervously around the room, avoiding direct contact with Sylvester and the others. There was no bravado here, only a hollow resignation as the truth closed in. The detectives laid out the evidence, the hidden freezer, the frightened child, the timeline of deceit, leaving no room for denial. Sylvester's voice, calm but resolute, broke the silence. "How could you do this? How could you hide a child in a place meant for food, where no one would hear her cries?" The culprit's response was weak, a jumble of excuses and broken explanations, unable to justify the cruelty or the fear inflicted. The man's words fell flat against the weight of the truth, revealing a darkness that had been masked by smiles and daily routines. Witnesses stepped forward, recounting odd behaviors and unexplained absences that now took on a chilling new meaning. The room seemed to close in, the facade of normalcy shattered by the brutal reality. For Sylvester, the confrontation was a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that justice was finally within reach, but sorrow for the innocence lost and the trust betrayed. He knew that punishment alone wouldn't heal the wounds, but it was a necessary step toward accountability. As the culprit was taken away, escorted by officers, the atmosphere shifted, lighter, yet heavy with the promise of difficult days ahead. Sylvester turned back to the little girl, now safe and protected, determined that her future would be brighter than the darkness she had endured. Facing the culprit was painful, but it was part of the journey, one that would lead to justice, healing, and ultimately, hope. Sylvester stood alone in the quiet of the now-closed restaurant, the distant hum of the city filtering through the windows. The day's events weighed heavily on his mind, but beneath the exhaustion was a fierce determination burning brighter than ever. This wasn't just about a single rescue. It was about a promise he intended to keep. He thought about the little girl, fragile yet resilient, and the fear she had endured. Her silence had been broken by a cry that reached him when no one else heard. Sylvester knew that saving her was only the beginning. There was a responsibility now, a personal vow to protect her, to fight for her future, and to make sure no child suffered in silence under his watch again. His mind raced with plans, improving security, creating safe spaces, training staff to recognize signs of distress, and working with local organizations to support vulnerable children. This restaurant, his pride and sanctuary, would become more than a place for meals. It would be a beacon of safety, a refuge for those in need. Stallone's voice was steady as he spoke to his trusted team the next morning, outlining new policies and protocols. His resolve was clear. Nothing would be overlooked, no warning sign ignored. "We have to be better," he said simply. "For her, and for every child who might not have a voice." Outside, the world was watching. The story had touched many hearts, and support poured in from unexpected places. But Sylvester remained focused on the quiet, ongoing work ahead, the hard, sometimes unseen fight to protect innocence. He often visited the little girl, offering kindness without pressure, a steady presence in a world that had been anything but steady for her. His vow was more than words. It was action, commitment, and a promise etched into every decision he made. Sylvester Stallone's personal vow was clear: to turn pain into purpose, to transform tragedy into hope, and to ensure that no cry for help would ever go unheard again. News of the chilling discovery spread quickly through the community, sending ripples of shock and disbelief far beyond the walls of Sylvester Stallone's restaurant. Friends, neighbors, and patrons who once saw the place as a warm gathering spot now grappled with the unsettling reality that something so dark had been hidden in plain sight. The very idea that a child had been trapped within the restaurant's cold freezer ignited a wave of fear and sorrow. Conversations filled local cafes and homes, the usual rhythms of daily life interrupted by whispers of betrayal and heartbreak. People struggled to reconcile the image of a beloved public figure's establishment with the harsh truth of what had occurred inside. Many felt anger, not just at the culprit, but at themselves for not noticing signs, for trusting too easily. Community leaders stepped forward, calling for awareness, vigilance, and support for victims of abuse. Town halls were organized, offering spaces for people to voice their concerns and seek answers. The incident became a catalyst for change, sparking discussions about safety, child protection, and the importance of speaking up. Despite the shock, a powerful sense of unity began to emerge. Local organizations mobilized quickly, providing resources for the little girl and others in need. Volunteers offered time and support, determined to rebuild trust and create a safer environment for all children. Sylvester found himself at the center of this wave, not as a distant celebrity, but as a committed advocate. He spoke candidly about the responsibility he felt, urging the community to learn from the tragedy and work together to prevent future harm. His actions inspired others to take a stand, transforming fear into hope. The community was shaken, yes, but also galvanized. In the face of darkness, they found a shared purpose: to protect their most vulnerable, to listen to the cries that often go unheard, and to heal together. It was a beginning, a painful one, but a beginning nonetheless. The little girl's recovery was slow and delicate, unfolding in the quiet safety of a caring environment surrounded by professionals and newfound friends. Each day brought small victories, faint smiles replacing tears, hesitant steps growing steadier, and moments of trust blossoming where fear once reigned. Sylvester visited often, offering gentle encouragement and a steady presence that helped anchor her in this new reality. Medical experts monitored her closely, treating the physical effects of cold exposure and malnutrition, while counselors worked patiently to unravel the trauma woven deep within her young mind. The process was neither linear nor easy. There were days when shadows from the past loomed large, and silence replaced words. But with each hurdle, the girl showed a quiet resilience that amazed everyone around her. Sylvester admired her strength, understanding that healing was not just about medicine, but about restoring hope and safety. He made sure she knew she was not alone, that she had a community standing behind her, ready to support every step forward. His visits became a comforting ritual, moments when she could feel normalcy and kindness without expectation or pressure. The restaurant staff, too, played a role in the healing process, volunteering time and resources to create a network of care. They organized fundraisers, donated toys and books, and helped create a welcoming space that celebrated the girl's courage and progress. What had once been a site of fear was slowly transforming into a symbol of renewal and compassion. Though the scars of her ordeal would take time to fade, The little girl's journey was a testament to the power of love and support. Sylvester saw in her eyes the flicker of a future filled with possibility. A future where the cry that once echoed in darkness was replaced by laughter and light. Her recovery was a beginning, not just for her, but for all who vowed to protect and cherish the innocent. It was a promise that no child would ever be forgotten or left behind again. The wheels of justice began to turn steadily as evidence mounted and investigators pieced together the full extent of the crime. Sylvester watched closely as law enforcement worked tirelessly to build a case strong enough to hold in court. Witness statements, surveillance footage, and forensic reports all converged, painting a clear and undeniable picture of wrongdoing. The former employee who had betrayed the trust of the restaurant and endangered the little girl faced serious charges: kidnapping, child endangerment, and abuse among them. Prosecutors prepared diligently, determined to seek the harshest penalties the law allowed. For Sylvester, this was not about vengeance, but about accountability and the protection of future victims. Court dates were set, and the community followed the unfolding legal battle with intense interest. Support poured in for the little girl and her family as advocacy groups rallied to ensure their voices were heard. Sylvester remained a steadfast advocate, lending his influence and resources to help navigate the complex legal landscape. The process was arduous, filled with emotional testimony and difficult confrontations. But each step forward was a victory, a sign that the system was working to deliver justice for the innocent and to send a message that such cruelty would not be tolerated. Sylvester met with legal advisors and counselors, coordinating efforts to provide the girl with ongoing protection and support throughout the trial. He understood that justice was more than a verdict. It was a promise to rebuild trust, safety, and hope. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the community's faith in justice grew stronger. The case became a rallying point, inspiring reforms in local policies and increased awareness about child protection. Justice was no longer a distant ideal. It was taking shape, tangible and real. And with every legal victory, Sylvester and those around him reaffirmed their commitment to stand unwaveringly for the vulnerable, to fight for truth, and to ensure that no child would ever again suffer in silence behind closed doors. Sylvester sat quietly in the empty dining room long after closing, the soft hum of the city drifting through the open windows. The day's events weighed heavily on him, but beneath the weariness was a silent resolve that refused to waver. Words were often unnecessary. His actions spoke louder than any speech could. He had seen darkness up close, but his focus remained unshaken: protect, heal, and rebuild. The ordeal had tested him in ways he hadn't expected. Yet, through every moment of doubt and frustration, Stallone's determination only grew stronger. The little girl's safety, her recovery, and the pursuit of justice had become his personal mission. This was not about fame or public praise. It was about real change, rooted in quiet strength and steady commitment. He spent long hours reviewing plans with his team, refining security measures, and reaching out to community organizations. Every detail mattered, from staff training to partnerships with child advocacy groups. Sylvester understood that true protection required vigilance and consistency, not just in moments of crisis, but every day. Despite the media attention and public scrutiny, he remained grounded, shielding the girl and her family from unnecessary exposure. His resolve was silent but powerful, a steadfast presence amid the chaos. He visited often, offering support without fanfare, letting his care be felt through actions rather than words. In the stillness of the restaurant after hours, Stallone reflected on the lessons learned. He vowed that this place, once marked by tragedy, would stand as a beacon of hope and safety. The fight was far from over, but his resolve was unbreakable. Sylvester's silent resolve was a promise to the little girl, to the community, and to himself. A promise that no cry for help would ever go unheard, no child left unprotected. In that quiet determination lay the true strength of a protector. The days that followed felt like a delicate bridge between the darkness that had been and the hope that was slowly taking root. The restaurant, once shadowed by fear, began to hum with renewed life and purpose. Sylvester watched as the community rallied around the little girl and the cause she had unknowingly ignited, a collective movement to protect, to heal, and to rebuild trust. Light filtered through the cracks of pain, reaching into spaces that had long been cold and silent. The girl's laughter, tentative but genuine, became a symbol of resilience and new beginnings. Each smile, each step forward, was a victory not just for her, but for everyone who had stood by her side. Sylvester took pride in the changes unfolding, not just in the restaurant's policies and security, but in the hearts of those around him. Staff members shared stories of awareness and empathy, inspired to be more vigilant, more compassionate. The community's response went beyond words, manifesting in volunteer efforts, support groups, and educational programs focused on child protection. The media's spotlight shifted from the tragedy to the triumphs, highlighting stories of courage and collective action. Sylvester remained humble, emphasizing that the real heroes were the little ones whose voices deserved to be heard and the people who refused to let darkness define them. In quiet moments, Sylvester reflected on the journey, from the chilling discovery to the unfolding hope. He knew scars would remain, but they were marks of survival, not defeat. The road ahead would still hold challenges, but with every hand joined, every heart opened, the future grew brighter. From darkness to hope, the story was far from over. It was a testament to the power of courage, community, and unwavering commitment. Sylvester vowed to keep walking that path, turning pain into purpose and ensuring that no child would ever face such darkness alone again. The restaurant buzzed with a renewed energy, a feeling of warmth and safety that had been missing for far too long. Sylvester stood behind the counter, watching familiar faces return, their smiles genuine and their conversations filled with hope rather than fear. Stallone's was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a symbol of resilience, community, and new beginnings. Walls that once held secrets now echoed with laughter and music. The staff, united by their shared experience, moved with purpose and pride, knowing that their roles went beyond serving meals. They were guardians of a safe space. Sylvester had overseen rigorous changes, enhanced security measures, thorough staff training, and partnerships with local support organizations. Every detail was designed to protect and nurture, ensuring that the past shadows would never darken these halls again. The little girl, now a regular visitor, sat quietly in a corner with a book, her eyes bright and her spirit healing. Sylvester's visits to her had become a cherished routine, moments of quiet encouragement and friendship. Her journey from fear to hope was a testament to the power of compassion and care. Community events hosted at the restaurant brought neighbors closer, fostering conversations about vigilance, kindness, and support. Sylvester often spoke candidly, reminding everyone that safety was a collective responsibility. His personal vow had transformed into a shared mission, one embraced by all who walked through the doors. As evening settled, Sylvester looked out over the bustling dining room, feeling a profound sense of peace. The restaurant was no longer just his business. It was a beacon of light forged from hardship and determination. A new beginning had truly arrived at Stallone's. It was a future built on trust, courage, and the promise that no darkness was too great to overcome when a community stands together. Sylvester knew the road ahead would have challenges, but with hope as their guide, they were ready to face whatever came next, together.